we're getting close to the Rosh Hashanah, and obviously there's a lot of interesting things happening. But I want to go back to what I was speaking about 2 weeks ago, the concept of the Ashkenaz and Sfad, right? Now, I had mentioned, and this is a very important idea, I had mentioned the concept that really there are 10 Sfirot, and these are forces that God uses to make the entire creation. And I also mentioned that each one of these forces is subdivided into 10 itself. Same 10, but it's a subdivision. And then each of these are again subdivided to 10 ad infinitum. It's a progression of 10 within 10 within 10 within 10 and so on. But what the main thing to consider is the first 2 levels. So there's 10 from Keter, Chochmah, Bina, and then there's of course Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod Yesod, Malchut. Those are 10, and within them each one has the same 10 Sfirot. So therefore, if you count all of them, there is 100. You see, 100 Sfirot. Now, what is interesting is that the concept of a Metaken, you see. Now, the concept of Sfirot within Sfirot is that it gives you each Sfira and each sub-Sfira, let's say Chesed of Chesed, okay? So Chesed is the original 10, and within that there's 10. So let's say there's Chesed of Chesed. What that does, it gives you a certain perception of God, you see. That's really what it is. It's like looking into a house that has 100 windows. There's 10 windows, 10 sections, okay? And each section has a further 10. And when you look into each one of those 10, right, or each one, let's say of one 100th, you're seeing a different aspect of the Shekhinah. So that's what it means, is that to look into each window means you see a certain aspect of God. Not that he's divided into 100, but it's like looking at an individual from different perspectives, and you just see different views, but it's the same individual, you see. So the same thing, when you see a Sfirah, let's say, of Chesed, then there's a certain Gilui, revelation of God within those, within that Sfirah of Chesed, you see? So in a certain sense, right, you have 100 total, right? Now, what's interesting is that each one, therefore, presents a certain view of the Shekhinah, and based on that view, that is how you serve God, you see, based on that view. So therefore, your culture, so to speak, emanates from your view of the aspect of God as seen from the perspective of that Sfirah, you see. Now, the first 3 Sfirot, which is Keter, Chochmah, Bina, they are what's called the roots. Those called the Gimel Rishonot, the first 3. And what they do is from them emanates the lower 7, you see. And from the lower 7, what we're talking about, you see, is the 7 Sfirot from Chesed to Malchut. They create Olam Hazeh. They create the entire universe, the physical universe, you see. And that's what they do. The upper 3, however, they are the shrashim, they are the roots of the lower 7. And the primary phase of those upper sfirot, the first 3, they create Olam Haba. They are the entryway to Olam Haba, you see. And that is why, there is the Keter Chochma Bina, Bina, then Chochma, and then Keter. That is the entryway for the Gilui of the Shechina in terms of Olam Haba. Whereas from Chesed to Malchut, that is the concept of Olam Hazeh. And that's why there are 7 days of the week, right? Each day is Keneged 1 Sfirah, you see. And if we have 7 Sfirot, within them is 10. So the number is 70 Sfirot for Olam Hazeh, and there are 30, so to speak, for Olam Haba. So that's basically what you begin to see, you see. Now, somebody who is a Metaken, somebody who can rectify creation, you see, in a certain sense, is connected to one of them. Every person has this neshama that is connected to some area of the 70 sfirot. That is the lowest 7 plus their 10, right, which is 70. So every person, in some way, his shoresh neshama, his soul is rooted in one of the 70. And based on that, that is the way he perceives God. And therefore, the products of his imagination or his mind, the way he worships God, is a result of the way he's connected to whichever sfirah, which one of the 70 he's connected to, you see. Now, Adam Rishon, who was the first Metaken, he was connected to all 70, you see, which is interesting. So he was the only one who was connected to the totality of all the perspectives of the Shekhinah, which basically total 70, because that is Olam Hazeh. And he was connected to all of them, you see. It's really very interesting. And like I say, he was the only neshama that had that. So in a certain sense, he had everything, and therefore his avodah, his worship of God, his doing the mitzvah of not eating from the tree, would have brought a tikkun to all 70 sections or 70 sfirot, you see. But when he sinned, what happened? So those 70 sfirot were now given to the what's called the 70 nations, the Ayin Umot. And that's really what this concept of 70 nations is that since there are 70 sfirot that create Olam Haba, and they are also the view to the Shekhinah, each one has its own view, and therefore it has its own way of seeing God, in a certain sense, and its own way of worshiping God, you see. So therefore, those Ayin Shroshim, which used to belong to Adam Rishon, now became distributed to 70 individuals, you see. In fact, if you count the individuals in Bereshit, and especially Noach, right, you will see that there are 70 people counted. Each one of them was a shoresh to a particular sfirah, one of the 70, you see. And therefore, altogether, mankind as one, altogether, if they would do the will of God, they would have brought a tikkun, they would have brought down the ore of all 70. And that's really what we have to do, you see. We have to bring down the ore of all 70, which has been tremendously diminished. In other words, what God did is the Sfirot initially created Olam Haba, those are the first 3 or the first 30. And then the other ones, the 70, they created Olam Hazeh. That's what they did, you see. And what those 70 did is as they began to create, they diminished in output. And as a result of that, the creation became more and more gross, whatever that means. So therefore, first there was created the Olam Haba, and then Olam Hazeh, and Olam Hazeh itself has 4 different levels of reality. And those are the 4 worlds of the Kabbalah: Atzilut, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiyah, you see. And the way they do it is that they diminish their output. And until at the end, the output of these Sfirot are so diminished, you see, that we are looking at a physical universe. And that's what they did. Now, the job of a Metaken, somebody who can rectify creation, which means to repair or to restore it to its original output, he is a Metaken, you see. And the way he does it, of course, is by doing the mitzvot. So as a result of that, he's able to Metaken the output, and therefore they grow in power. It's like a 1,000-watt bulb that has been turned down to 100. And then you could turn it up again. So they have been turned down to make a physical universe. But what can happen is you can diminish, you can increase their output, and all of a sudden, all the worlds of Olam Hazeh now change back into a higher world. You see. So what happens is that from the year 6,000 to the year 7,000, you see, is, as I said, is changes Asiyah, which is the first 6,000 years. So from 6 to 7 becomes Yetzirah. From 7,000 to 8,000 comes Bria. From 8,000 to 9,000, these are years. 8,000 to 9,000, the output of the Sfirot are increased, and that is Atzilut. And then from 9,001 and onward, forever, is Olam Haba, you see. So that's what happens. So ultimately, the task of a Metaken, ultimately, is to reverse the diminishment of the output of the Sfirot, to sort of like turn them on again, but to increase enormously the output. And as a result of that, you change reality from the lowest to the highest. And once you reach the highest, which is called Adam Kadmon, or primordial man, which is the world of Olam Haba, then that output is, of course, eternal. It never diminishes again, and that output actually continues to grow in that sense, you see. But in any case, we don't know what the reality is. What does it look like, a world that has an output of Olam Haba? We don't know what that is. That is an existence which is completely incomprehensible to us now. So that's really, in a certain sense, what a Metaken does. He dials up, so to speak, the output of enormous spiritual energy that comes from a Sfira, and that changes reality. And that's the concept of Tikkun, to repair or to rectify or to restore the original output of Olam Haba, you see. So Adam Rishon, initially speaking, he was able to do that by himself. But when he sinned, then the 70 Shrashim, which are the 70 Sfirot, which are the 10 of each of the lower 7, which creates the realities, that was now given to different people, you see. So you would have a person that was a Rosh, who was the head. He would be connected to that Sfira, his Neshama, and he would then give birth to people who are sparks of him, you see. And they will all have it's like a tree that is connected to the ground, and the roots of the tree are inserted in the ground. But you have a trunk of a tree, which is one trunk, and that is connected to the root, you see. So the ground, so to speak, is God. The roots of the tree is the Shekhinah, so to speak, or it is one of the Sfirot, you see. The trunk is the person connected to those roots, which are inserted in the ground. And all the branches, you see, I'm using a tree as a beautiful example. It's called a metaphor of the relationship between the shamot. And all the brown branches, and then branches itself, have smaller branches coming out, and so on. That's why you can have 1,000 different branches coming out of one tree. But ultimately, they all come out of main branches, which ultimately all comes out of a trunk, which, of course, is all embedded in the ground based on the roots. And that is the concept, you see. So there are 70 shlashim, and there are 70 nations, or 70 individuals that become the root of those 70 sfirot, and their kids are all now connected to them. You see, so the totality of everybody now becomes the totality of the tikkun. You see how it works, and that's really the Metaken. But like I said, the problem was that Adam lost his ability to connect to all 70. You see. And therefore, that was given over to different individuals, 70 individuals. And therefore, that's the concept of the 70 nations. Because really you have 70 sfirot and sub-sfirot. And there is always a person that's the root, and then all his descendants are nothing more than what's called the mitzotzot, the sparks, you see. And that's what happened in the time of Noah. In the time of Noah, you had the people that were all connected ultimately to the Sfirot. But you had Ayin Umus, you see, which are 70 individuals which are connected to the whole network of Sfirot. But what happened, which is interesting, what happened is that the nations sinned. And we know that because, first of all, you had the Mabul, you had all the Ayin Umus sinned, right? And therefore God destroyed, because all the 70 aspects of Sfirot were all contaminated with Zoyama, with the pollution of the Satan. So God got rid of them. Then you had the next 10 generations, you see, which were again supposed to Metaken the 10 Sfirot and their sub-Sfirot. They also sinned. So what God did is he took the 70 nations, you see, and he disconnected them from the roots that were embedded in the Shekhinah. So now you had, which is interesting, you still had the 70 ayin. In other words, you still had the concept of 70 nations, and now there were nations, but they were no longer connected to the ground. It's almost like you sawed off the tree. So you still had a tree, you still had a trunk with its branches and so on, but it was no longer connected to the ground. So therefore, it could no longer either receive influence from the ground, which is the Sfirot, or it could no longer rectify or repair the what's called the occlusion, the hester of that root, you see? Which is interesting. So you had the concept of Ayin Umus, and they still maintained the connection to this. You had the concept, and they still maintained their concept of 70, but they no longer could do the tikkun, because they were no longer connected to the Sfirot in a way that they could bring a tikkun to that. Why did God do that? Because again, Dor Haflaga, the generation that was dispersed, because again they sinned, they wanted a war with God, which we know, and they all created this incredible tower, the Tower of Babel, Migdal Bavel, and they all decided to go to war. So therefore what God did is he allowed them to maintain the concept of 70, but they no longer could bring a tikkun to the shurish itself. They were disconnected. But the question then is, wait a minute. You have to, that the whole purpose of the Bria is to bring the tikkun to the 70 aspects of the Sfirot, which was originally the task of the 70 individuals, which became 70 nations. You see. So then how would it be rectified? You see. And therefore what God did is he gave the entire 70 Shrashim that is connected to the Sfirot. He gave it to who? To Avraham Avinu. You see? So what happened is incredible. Avraham Avinu became connected. He got all the Shrashim in him, and he was connected to all the 70 Sfirot by himself. You see? So therefore, all his people, the Jewish people, are now 70. We have the 70 Shrashim, you see, that are connected to the 70 Sfirot. In fact, what is a very interesting allusion or remez is where Avraham Avinu says, Anoichi Ofor ve'efer. I am Ofor, which is dirt, dust, ve'efer, and ashes. If you remember, it says that when he's speaking, Avraham Avinu says that. Now, it's interesting, the word Ofor is Ayin Peresh, and the word Efer is Aleph Peresh, you see. So we know also that the 70 oxen that were sacrificed on Sukkot, they are in some way to rectify the 70 Sfirot, the 70 oxen, the 70 Purim. That's how many there are, by the way. They start off with 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. If you add them all up, that's 70. So the 70 Purim, the 70 oxen that were sacrificed on Sukkot, right, they represent the 70 Sfirot. So Avraham Avinu said the following: I am Ofor, Ayin Par, the Efer, and I am Aleph Par. That means originally I was only one of the 70. So therefore I was Aleph, one Par. I was only one cow, which means I represented only one of this 1/70th of the totality of the 70. But now, after God made a covenant, an agreement with me, and that was the Brit Ben Habitarim, that was the Brit Ben Absarim, and that was a tremendous event where God took away the ability of the 70 people and their descendants, the 70 nations. He disconnected them from the Sfirot, and he made the connections, the Shrashim of Avraham. He took it from one, which is Aleph, Efer, and he gave him Ayin, 70. You see, so Avraham Avinu says, I used to be Aleph Par, which is Efer, right? I used to have only one connection, because I was one of the 70. But now I am Ayin Para Afar. You see, I myself am the 70. You see, so it comes out that Avraham Avinu, the first Jew, he becomes the Metaken. And he now, in order to do that, he must now have in him 70 connections to the 70 Sfirot. You see how it works? And that's what Avraham, and that's why God said to him, now we understand the brachot, where God says to Avraham, you know, V'nivrechu b'cho, kol mishpachos v'adomo, and in you will be blessed all the nations of the earth. Why? Because the blessings come to who? Only if the Sfirot have a tikkun. In other words, if the Sfirot now increase their illumination, that brings tremendous bracha to the world, you see. But if they don't do that, you see, then of course you have not bracha, you have of course the reverse of that. So God now gave the ability, God now gave the ability of of Avraham Avinu to Metaken the Ayin Umus, you see, the Ayin Shrashim. Therefore, we Jews have this Ayin. The Goyim have it, but they're disconnected. That is their problem, which is interesting. You see, that they still have it, and that's why it's called Ayin Umus. There are 70 nations. That's what they're referred always as, because they never lost the facet of being connected, you see, to the Shrashim. But what they did lose is their connection to the Sfirot, which was given to Avraham Avinu, and therefore, because you are connected to all the Sfirot, all 70, that's Olam Hazeh, therefore you can Metaken all the 70. And if you can Metaken all the 70, then the world will be blessed through you. You see? And that is why when God says to Avraham Avinu, and in you will be blessed all the nations of the world, because you now have the 70 as opposed to 1, right? And not even that, but your 70 is connected to the Sfirot. So every Jew, you see, has one of the 70, and he is connected to the Sfirot through his Shurish. You see the way it works. That's a very important idea, you see. And that is what's called the spiritual basis of the Jewish people. Now, once you understand that, we understand many things. Why is the number 70 so prevalent, you see, in Hashkafa? Well, we now understand what the 70 are. There are 7 Sfirot, with their 10, which is 70, you see. And we are all connected in some way. Each one of us, in his own way, is connected to a particular aspect of the Sfirot. And each Jew is connected to that aspect. And only you can metaken that aspect, you see. Because your neshama is connected to that place. If you don't do the job, then you have to come back. Because nobody else can fill that spot. Only you. So therefore you come back as a Gilgul, which is reincarnate. You see? Because you are connected to that area. You're the only one that can illuminate that place, you see. And that is why the concept of 70 is very prevalent. Where? So we see that the concept of what? We now understand that Avraham Avinu has 70, until now I was 1 par, and now I am 70 par, you see, which means I have all 70 within, and therefore that's why God says anybody who curses you will be cursed. Why? Because if they curse you, you will not be able to do the tikkun. And if you don't do the tikkun, then they are cursed because they won't be receiving what you could do. And if they bless you, then they will be blessed also, because then you will be able to do the tikkun, right? And of course, they will also be blessed because they will receive the output of the sfirot, you see. Now, from the ayin, which is the basis of all metaknim, the basis of all individuals that can bring a tikkun, in some way are connected to the 70, you see. Now, when God said to Avraham Avinu, that your children will go into a land, right, and they will be strangers and they will suffer there and so on, which God was saying that eventually all the Jews have to go to Egypt. Why? I think I once said, I don't remember, but because the Jews have to remove the zoyamo of the entire bria, you see. They have to remove, when God made a covenant with Avraham Avinu, he said that, I'm going to now change the union of ayin, the concept of the 70, you will get the concept of the 70, you see. But that's not enough, because you need to remove the zoyamo that is connected, right, to the 70, but not really. Now here's an interesting idea. Remember, there are 10. First 3 is Olam Habo, the bottom 7 is Olam Hazeh, you see. So now, when Zoyamo, however, connects to the Sfirot to block the light, and that's the concept of the Zoyamo blocking the light, the Zoyamo can only block the light of 7. It cannot block the light of the upper 3. Therefore, the Zoyamo, when it does block it, as a result of the sins of 2,000 years of Adam and Noach and so on, right, it can only block 49. Why? Because you have 7, but it cannot block all 10 of each individual 7, because those first 3 is Olam Habo. The Zoyamo cannot reach the upper 3, but it can reach, which means block the ore of the lower 7. So therefore, the lower 7 in general is 7, and their 7 sfirot is how many? 49. You see? That's why after Pesach, when we count, we only count 49 days, because there's only 49 parts of the Zoyama that can connect the 49 parts of the Sfirot. It cannot connect to the first 3 of any of them, you see, which is interesting. So the Tikkun is on all 70, but the removal of the Zoyama is only on 49, you see, because it can only block the ore of 49 Sfirot, which is 7, and 7 of those 7, which is 49. You see how it works? That's how it works. Okay? So we now understand. So when God said to Abraham that you need to remove the Zoyama, you see, therefore you need to go to Egypt to remove the Zoyama. So the pollution that mankind did for 2,000 years. So they all went to Egypt and removed it through Yisurim, basically. And therefore they counted 49 days. You see, which is a 7, which is the 7 of the 7, which is 49. And therefore they only had 49 days to remove the Zoyama. Once they could remove the Zoyama, then they could be privy to all the Tikkun of all 70. You see, and that is why, if you think about it, how many panim are there to the Torah? There are 70. Remember it says, Ayin panim the Torah? There are 70 facets to the Torah. Why? Because the Torah is the totality of the ore of how many? Of 70 Sfirot, which is the lowest 7, right? And 10 of each of those 7. 70. That's what the Torah really is. The Torah is the illumination, or the chokhmah, or the wisdom, or the knowledge of 70 Sfirot. And therefore, since that's the Sfirot that gets the Tikkun, you see, therefore, there are Ayin Panim the Torah, you see. But what's also interesting is how many Jews went into Egypt. How many Jews went into Egypt in order to remove the Zoyama, right, from the 7 Sfirot? And the answer is 70. It says how many? B'shivin shiv'im nafesh, and 70 souls went into Egypt. You see. And therefore, why? Because since Avraham Avinu took over the 70 roots of all the nations, then the people who go to Egypt to do the task of removing the Zoyama is also 70. You see. That's why 70 souls went into Egypt. You see? You see how it makes perfect sense? Because you needed 70 individuals, and each one would have one shurish that used to belong to the Goyim, you see, and they would have one shurish, you see. And that is also why you have Ayin Sanhedrin, because you needed 70 members of the Sanhedrin. Each one had a certain view, so to speak, of the perspective of Torah that he would give to the entire Sanhedrin. So therefore the Sanhedrin also has 70, you see. And of course, since you have 70 nations, that's why you have 70 languages. Ayin Shonot, you see. You see, so we begin to understand now what the origin of all these 70s are. The 70 nations, which are those nations, people, and their descendants that were disconnected from the Sfirah, you see. And not only that, you had the 70 nations, you had the 70 Shrashim, the 70 Sfirot, right? You had the 70 Shrashim of Avraham Avinu, you had the 70 Nefashot that went into Egypt, you see. That's why you have 70 aspects of Torah. That's why you have 70 Sanhedrin. You see how they all line up? And therefore, you now basically have two fundamental kinds of people. You have a person that is a Metaken, and he is somehow connected to somewhere in the Sfirot, of the 70 Sfirot, you see. Then you have mankind that is not connected at all. However, what he does have is that he's still, in a certain sense, he's connected to the Sfirot, but not able to Metaken them. So he still has the perspective of the Sfirah, even though he has no influence whatsoever on what he does. When you think about that, that's fascinating. You see? Now, I'm going to tell you a little story, and I realized something in that little story. Many years ago, I had given a sort of like a Shabbaton in Deal, New Jersey. Okay? So I was sitting in the shul in Deal. I was sitting, whatever. And there was a chazan. I forgot his name, but he had a beautiful voice. It was a Sfar. He was praying Sfardit, which is very interesting. And I was sitting there, and he was singing, his as a chazan. It was really very beautiful the way he was saying it. And I said to myself, boy, what this guy's doing is absolutely incredible. I feel like I am now in Arabia. I felt like I was in the Kasbah in Morocco. Because the way the Arabs sing and so on, they have their unique way of approaching music. So I said to myself, why is a fundamental aspect of Judaism, why does it resemble Arabs? You understand what I asked? That was my question. Why does it resemble? Why does the avodah of tefillah, or in general, why is there a whole group of people called the Sfaradim, whether it be Syrian or Moroccan or Egyptian or whatever, right? Why is it that most of their culture is Arabic, or it feels like it's the Middle East, right? And then you have the other kind, which is the Ashkenazim. Their culture is Ashkenaz, is Europe, Germany. You see? What divides these two? And then, sitting there, I realized, because what happened is the one who represents the 35 aspects of the Sfirot, and not connected to them, is Yishmael. Yishmael is the fundamental root of all 35 nations that are connected to 35 Sfirot. You see, Esav, or Edom, he is the fundamental individual that his neshama is the root of all 35 other Sfirot. You see? So I realized at that point in time that what the Jews have to do, and this is why they are Sfardim and Ashkenazim, the Jews, that part of the Jewish people have to go through the Arab lands, the Middle East, or what's called the Orient, and they have to be absorbed into the culture of those Goyim that used to be connected to 35 Sfirot, but now disconnected. And these Jews have to take the perspective of what these people have and do the avodah. You see? In other words, their avodah has to be with the same perspective as the Arabs or the Middle East. You see, which is very, very interesting. You see, and so that is the concept of Sfard, that the Sephardic, the segment of the Jewish population which is called Sfard, you see, they have to be connected. They have to be in the Arab lands. And in the Arab lands, they will take the culture of the Arab people, and their culture comes from their ability to perceive 35 Sfirot. And that's the origin of their culture, really, you see. That determines their music, determines their cuisine. There's so many things that come out of that. And the Jews have to be absorbed into that place and take their perspective and use it to serve God. That is why Syrians or Moroccans or Egyptians or Lebanese, whatever, Iraqis and so on, therefore what they do is they worship God. Their way of worshiping God is exactly what that is using the 35 Sfirot of Yishmael. You see? Because even though Yishmael is not connected anymore, you see, to the Sfirot, 35 of them, but their culture represents, a unique perspective on God. And the Jews have to use that culture worshipping God, you see, and therefore they bring a tikkun to 35 sfirot. So it's interesting that even though the Goyim are not connected at all to the sfirot, but their culture, the whole Arabian culture, Middle Eastern culture, does come from a view of this 35 sfirot. So the Jews have to go into that culture, you see, use their culture, which the Sfardim do, and they are metaken the sfirot 35 of Ishmael. The Ashkenazim, they do the others. They have to be absorbed in the lands of Esav, Edom. That's Germany. That's the whole Europe, you see, and they have to be absorbed in that country, and they use the avodah of the perspective of Edom or Esav, you see, and therefore their way of serving God has different minhagim. I mean, the mitzvot are the same, but the meta dimension of those cultures and so on, both segments of the Jewish people, part of them go into the segment of Ishmael, and we take away what Ishmael should have done originally, which is the tikkun of 35 sfirot, and the other segment is Ashkenaz. We take away the culture, we worship using the culture of what could have been, which Esav could have done. You see the way it works. And that is the origin of Sfardim and Ashkenazim. Now, in the end of time, it will know once the Jews will have done the tikkun, you won't have the concept anymore of Ashkenaz and Sfard, you see, because it won't be necessary. The Jews will have done the tikkun of all the Sfirot. And that is one of the reasons why Ashkenaz and Sfardim are being blurred, the difference. Because you have what's called, I hate to use the word intermarriage, but that's what's happening, is Sfardim and Ashkenazim are marrying each other. And the distinction where one is involved in the avodah of Yishmael and the other is involved in the avodah of Edom or Esav, that distinction is ending slowly, you see. And the end of time, right, then there will be no distinction basically, because it's all about the avodah to bring a tikkun to all 70 of the sfirot. Now you understand why there's Ashkenaz and there's also Sfard, you see, because each one has to be absorbed in those two specific cultures, the Middle East, Arabs and so on, Ishmael, and the other one is Edom, Esav. The Jews have to be absorbed in that, and from both of these cultures, which is their way of interacting with the 35 sfirot for Ishmael, 35 sfirot for Esav, we take that way of looking and thinking and so on, and we use that for mitzvot. You see how it works. And that is really, in many ways, the origin of Sfard. Because before that, there was no Ashkenaz, really. Before the Jews left Babylon, what happened is they left Babylon and they crossed into North Africa. And then from North Africa, right, when you had persecutions, they crossed over the Mediterranean into Spain. And from Spain, after the expulsion, they went into Germany, they went into Poland, they went into Russia. That's the migration of the Jewish people. But the Jews had to migrate, so they originally started in Yishmael's area, you see. And ultimately, they wound up later on in the area of Ashkenaz or Germany, you see. But that's only in order to remove ultimately, or to Metaken, ultimately 35 sfirot of Ishmael, 35 sfirot of Esav, because they are the major heads of all the Ayin Ummos, you see. So 70 Ummos, 35 is for Ishmael, 35 is for Esav, and therefore there are two different distinct segments of Jews with their own customs, their minhagim, their tefillot, and so on. But like I said, ultimately there won't be a need anymore because all 70 sfirot will have a tikkun. And that is the origin. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. So,
I hope that's understood.
Abraham had the 70. How
Yes.
did it split up between Esav and Ishmael?
How did what?
How did it split up between Esav and Ishmael? Like, where's the jump from Abraham to Esav and Ishmael?
Well, you have to remember, Ishmael was the son of Abraham, right?
Yeah, that I know, but then what happened? How did Esav get into the picture?
Now, when Ishmael, he wanted to kill Yitzchak, if you remember the whole story there, and Sarah, she drove away Hagar. So therefore, because he was a son of Abraham, he became the head of the 35 Shrashim that were disconnected. And then when Yitzchak had Yaakov and Esav, and he disappeared, he obviously, he strayed from Judaism. He became completely, away from Judaism. Then he took over the 35 of the other 35, which is the Ashkenaz. You see, both of them are children. Both of them were originally Jewish. Ishmael, right, and Esav. They were originally both Jewish people. So when they disconnected themselves from Judaism, then they took over the Shrashim, you see, of the Umas Ha'olam of the 70 nations. You see?
Mm-hmm. So now I'm just trying to connect it to what I learned. So now when we learned in Ma'amad HaGeulah, we learned that when Bnei Israel said, Naaseh v'nishma, Naaseh was Esav, and we got one crown from him, and Nishma was Ishmael, and we got the crown from them. So those, each crown, the 35 Sefirot that we were getting back from them, was that the tikkun at that time? Was that like one moment?
That's right, yeah. That was elevated because when you receive the Torah, which I had mentioned, 2-3 weeks ago, the whole concept of Torah changing. So the highest level of tikkun obviously was Kabbalat HaTorah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You see how it all fits?
Yes, so that's when they were able to remove the Zohama.
That's right. And in Egypt, they were able to remove the Zohama. Exactly.
Right, so 49, and then they said Naaseh and Ishmael when they got the 35 each back, and then they did the tikkun and they were ready.
That's right. Exactly. Wow.
Rabbi, I have
the what?
I have a question in regards to, you say when Mashiach comes, there's not going to be a difference between Ashkenaz and Sephardic, but which way will it be? Will it be the Sephardic way or the Ashkenaz way? How will it work? Like, who's going to have...
That's a very good question. Which way will it be? That's a very good question. I don't know. It's not clear, because each one represents 35 Sfirot. So once they will merge, it's not clear which one will become predominant. Maybe half and half. You know what I'm saying? Because there are certain things that Sfardim do, which are very important.
So I know.
And the same thing with Ashkenaz, But there will be, in the time of the Mashiach, there will be that merger.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be Sephardic because all the great people, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, even Ishmael and Esav, were all from Sephardic lands. Nobody was from Europe lands.
Yeah. Well, remember the Jews were all Sfardim in that sense. There was no Ashkenaz. So I don't know. You would look. The concept of Sfarad means Spain, right? Before Spain, there was no such thing as Ashkenaz. Basically, all the Jews lived in either Babylon, right, Bavel, which is Babylon, Iraq, or they lived in Eretz Yisrael, or they lived in Egypt, in Alexandria. There was no Ashkenaz. Nobody really lived at all in Europe. It's only slowly as they went from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, then they migrated over Africa, North Africa, and then from North Africa they migrated into Spain as a result of all the persecutions, you see. And then from Spain, when they kicked out, that's when the real, what do you call it? Actually, they migrated earlier because they migrated to Germany, into France, England. Those are all the Bali Toisos. That's the whole Toisos on the Shas, on the Gemara. They were basically all Ashkenaz. Toisos, Rashi, all the Rishonim, Achronim, and that's what began the great Ashkenazi migration, and so on, and like I say, apparently before that it wasn't necessary, So maybe it could be that since the original customs of the Jews were basically Middle East before Ashkenaz, maybe in a certain sense they will return to do the Sfadim, which means you guys are gonna have to teach me how to cook Sfad.
Don't worry. If you eat it, you're halfway there.
That's it.
Rabbi, you won't have to cook. We'll cook for you. Don't worry about that.
We're going to have man.
Yeah, that's right, But, yeah.
All right, so
but
why would I need to split it? Like,
why
Jews?
What was that?
Why would Hashem need to split the Jews?
Because there's Esav and Yishmael, both of them, the heads of the Shrashim of the Umas Ha'olam, which were disconnected from the Sfirot, even though they had the window into the Sfirot. You see, so you need a tikkun, but the tikkun has to be using the same perspective that these Umas had. What do you think determines culture? Culture is what's called an amalgam. It's a whole series of ways of doing things. For instance, Mexico, right? Mexico has its language, it has its cuisine, it has the world. Why is that so? And the same thing, why is Mexico different, let's say, than Russia? Approach. And the answer to that is because that is, in some way, the way that they perceive the Sfirot. You see?
Unmute yourself.
What was that?
No, if someone was making a lot of noise, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, you have to shut off the, you see. But in the end, the world boils down to 70. And that is why, like I say, that's why the Jews have the 70. Like I say, that's why they needed 70 souls to come into Egypt in order to take over, to do the tikkun of all 70 sfirot. You see. Even though to remove the Zoyama, you only had to remove it from 49. Like I said, because the Satan cannot seize the upper 3. He can only seize the lower 7. You see.
So now you said the tikkun is almost done. Now it's about 98%, right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. So, but I still feel that we're on a very low level. Like I don't feel that we're up to the 49 or any level close to removing the Zohama. You understand?
Well, I guarantee you one thing. The Jews in Egypt did not feel it either, because they were at the 49th level of Tumah. So how could they feel that they removed the Zoyama? But right. In reality, they did, you see, because the Zoyama has different ways of being removed, not only of doing mitzvot and also tshuva, but also yisurin. Suffering removes the ability of the Zoyama to attach itself. That's why suffering is a kapara. A kapara means that the Zoyama in some way dissolves. So I guarantee you the Jews did not think that they had done the tikkun of removing the Zoyama. But in effect they did. And that's why the 49 days, from Pesach to Shavuot, they were able to remove literally that which what they did is they loosened the hold of the Zoyama on the Sfirot. And each day that passed, they were actually be able to remove it from the Sfirah. And ultimately, once you remove the Zoyama from the Sfirot, then the complete illumination you see, of the Sfirot could shine, and that was the Geula.
Okay.
Once you remove all the Zoyamo from the Sfirot, that is the Geula. That is the redemption. And that's what the Torah was at that point in time anyway, before the sin of the golden calf.
So,
you
Rabbi,
see?
So,
yeah.
Okay. At what point in the process of Mashiach do we start counting those 49 days?
Not yet. Because we are still in the end phases of Zoyamo, to remove the Zoyamo.
So that's after Yosef already came, Beit HaMikdash is already there, we're in Israel, David comes, and then we start counting 49?
Yes, that's right.
So it's at the
9.5
end.
years then.
That's at the end.
Rabbi, I want to know what Sefirah I'm connected to, which Shoresh?
Yeah, how do we know so we can make our own tikkun?
Well, you have to have somebody that can look at your neshama and tell you how you're connected.
And you know how to do that?
Not at present, no.
Not at present. He's waiting.
Are you working on it?
We're waiting. No, he's waiting for the what's it called, the klipot to be cut next weekend, and then you could tell us.
Okay. Well, when I get it, I will be able to tell you. Yes.
I want to learn about the Sefirot. Somebody told me that it's connected to the Aseret HaDibrot.
Yes. Each Sefirah is one Dibur.
Can we learn in depth about it? Is it interesting?
Well, it's just another aspect of the Torah, another view. I once told you that there are 4 things lined up. There's the 10 Sefirot, right, which became the 10 Ma'amarot, as it says in Pirkei Avot, the Asur Mamoros. Those 10 statements were the 10 spheres, and the Makot in Egypt, those were the physical manifestation of the Sfirot themselves, you see. And the reward that the Jews got for removing the Zoyama of those 10, right, is the Asara, the Dibros, the 10 commandments. Each commandment is connected a Sfirah. They're all you have, it's what's called a matrix of 40, 10, 10, 10, 4 times. And they're all parallels, you see. So that's what happened in Egypt, you see. So the Egyptians were destroyed by the Sfirot themselves, because once the Jews had removed the pollution or the tumah, the zoyhamo of the Sfirot, right, then each Sfirah was now fully illuminated, and it would now destroy Egypt with the actual Sfirah. See? That's what happened, you see. And so, in other words, the Jews themselves did that, you see. But it happened at different times, yeah.
If we're close to doing the tikkun,
yes.
That means that the Sfirot should be somewhat illuminated, correct?
Well, like I say, even if it's illuminated, it gets darkest before the dawn.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We don't feel that illumination yet, or like we
do,
but in little sparks of it, but not in a.
Because the darkness is growing more and more, right? And ultimately, as I once mentioned in that shiur with the windows and the gate, is ultimately it gets darker and darker, and then all of a sudden, in a split second, there's an unbelievable illumination. Although the actual thing itself, they say that the messianic light will enter like sunlight. In the beginning, what happens? If you ever get up early in the morning before dawn and you look out the window, you begin to see a very slight light in the east. And it grows and grows, but you don't see the sun. About an hour or whatever later, all of a sudden you see the disk of the sun, a very small spot as it pierces the horizon. And then the sun rises, and it rises and rises. You see, it's a very slow process. That's the same idea of the Geula. The Geula takes time. we really see this, you guys mentioned this, we really see this from Egypt. Because we would think that when Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Egypt, then it's over. Yet we realize that it took a year. Moshe Rabbeinu talked with the Rebbeinu Shalom at the Sneh on Tetzvav Nisan. That's when it happened. Yet it took 1 year to go out of Egypt. Could you imagine? So therefore you realize that the Geulah does not happen in an instant. It takes time, and I once told you why. Because there are many dinim. What's interesting is that God does not wait to begin the messianic process at the end. He doesn't want to wait for the end. You see, what he does is he starts the process before. But the problem is, if you start it before the tikkun, right, then as a result of the fact that it is started before the tikkun, right, then it can't leave, basically, because the tikkun is not complete. Yet God wants to start the process early. And that's the concept of Rahmanut, of mercy. Doesn't want to wait till the end, literally, and then start. He starts it actually when the Jews cannot get out. So in a certain sense, when it reaches a certain point of darkness, God wants to illuminate the darkness or give hope even in the darkness by actually starting the process, even though it has not ended. So even though it takes another year until they get out, right? But he started the Geulah a year before. You see? Same idea. The Geulah will start even though the Jews have not completed the process, because he wants to start the Geulah and the Jews are disappearing. You see? Look, you know what the equivalent is? Mem Teshai Tumah. The Jews were at the 49th level of Tumah, which means that they almost disappeared as a distinct nation. So therefore God said, I'm not going to wait, or else there's nobody to redeem. I will now begin the process, even though the messianic process is still happening and there is no redemption yet, but I need to start the process so at least the Jews can see it and have hope. Same thing now, if you think about it, right? Take a look. Most Jews are gone. Out of the 14 million Jews who are alive today, 11 million are gone. What does gone mean? They're not Shomer Shabbos. There's no Taharat Mishpacha. There's nothing. Most of them don't even know they're Jewish. And most of them, many of them, are married to Goyim. You see? So that's really the equivalent of Mem Teshai Tumah. The fact that most Jews are gone is basically the equivalent of that the Jews are on the 49th level of evil. So what's God going to wait until they're all gone? Of course not. So in a certain sense, using Egypt as the model, right, what's going to happen is that God will start the process before the redemption. And the Jews will begin to realize that there's something going on, you see. But the redemption won't happen until the tikkun itself, just like Egypt. But what we're waiting for is the actual initiation of the process, because then we know it's going to happen. And that seems to be happening now. I gave a shiur, which I'm sure you all heard, between Biden and Trump, you see. And we are coming down to an incredible darkness where there will be an unbelievable amount of anti-Semitism if Biden wins in America, you see. So we are literally facing the darkness. Just like the Jews faced tremendous darkness before Moshe Rabbeinu came, we are facing a possibility of unbelievable darkness, you see. But what's going to happen is there will be a Geulah. The process will begin, even though the redemption doesn't happen yet, because it is a process. It takes time. You see?
Rabbi, I have a question for you.
Yeah?
As I get more religious and more like, when I say religious, of course, more things I'm taking up upon myself, but also more like intention when I'm doing mitzvot. So like when I'm doing a mitzvah, there's so much more thought process behind it, and then more connection with Hashem, and it just feels more spiritually awakening through the mitzvah. But I find that as I spiritually grow in that sense, the Satan always tries to put a worst case scenario of something to happen in my head. Not in the outside world, because that doesn't affect me, but more within my kids or myself or something like that, to try to get me off my track.
Correct.
Right when I'm in that high, something the Satan tries to put something into it. So what do you recommend doing?
Well, I recommend following. The Satan will not give up. You see, it's to try to knock you out or knock you over. You see, the trick is this. You have to recognize that it's a battle. It's a struggle, and it will not end until he's dead, or whatever that means in terms of angels and so on, Therefore, your key is tshuva. No matter how much all of a sudden you find yourself difficult to do avodah, or whatever nisayon you have, you need to remember you can do tshuva. You can repent right then and there and restart. The trick is, by the way, not that you can't, not to fall, because we all fall. The trick is to get up, no matter how many times you're knocked down. It says, Sheva yipol tzaddik bekom. A tzaddik will fall 7 times, but come and he will arise. That's what it is. The trick is never give up the struggle. And it doesn't make a difference if you fall. Of course, it's preferable not to fall. But listen, that's the human condition. What God wants is the struggle, not only the victory. Because the struggle is the victory. You see?
Got it. I love that.
That's really what it is. They say, as long as you are in the arena, you're okay. Whether how many times you get knocked down, okay, difficult. But it doesn't make a difference. Just get up again and just restart and go again and again. And ultimately, you will be victorious.
Rabbi, I've been saying Avinu Malkeinu since Corona started. And
what was that?
It's Rachel. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. What are you saying?
I'm saying Avinu Malkeinu every day after the Amidah when I pray since Corona started. And every day I feel like the Satan is telling me, stop saying it. Whenever I hear that thing in my head, I continue to say it. Do I continue saying it or should I stop saying it?
Well, the question is, why are you saying it in the first place?
Because
you wanted to say
it. It said there were certain prayers in there that apply to give us a good year, get away the bad things.
Okay, so then, exactly. Well, the Satan is trying to knock you off your perch. Same idea.
Stop. Whenever that voice tells me something, I continue praying it.
Exactly. Look, the Satan is desperate. He's at the end of the line.
Hey, you can find other people.
What?
Why is he bothering me? Let him go to somebody else.
Because Rachel, you are a special neshama.
Really?
Amen.
That's why he wants to bother you.
Yeah, he wants to bother me too. I'm having that inner battle.
Exactly. He's not going to give up. He's trying.
Every time I try to do something, a really bad thing happens. Like my closet breaks, my teeth hurt, major thing,
Okay. He's trying to, in some way, make you dejected or.
No, it's trying to scare me, away from it.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I say, don't. You need to keep in the struggle. As long as you're in it, you're fine. You see?